So what is digital logic and how does it differentiate from the analog world? Well, you might be familiar with a sine wave, for example, and that has, 0 volts here and 1 volt here and -1 volt here, for example. And this is a representation of an analog signal, and it can vary anywhere, within that range, for example. But you might be familiar that a digital system is represented like this. It only has two particular levels like this. And these can be called logic 1 and logic 0. They could be called 5 volts and 0 volts. It could be 3.3 volts and 0 volts might be common voltages, for example. There's other ones. It just represents a binary representation of analog voltages. So digital is still analog in terms of the actual waveform, but the way it's interpreted and represented, it's only in binary form like this, and it could be called 1 or 0, also called true, false, for example, and they, any name you want to give it, it doesn't matter. It represents two different logic states. And because digital still lives in the analog world, then we have to actually set boundaries. If this is 0 volts here and this is 5 volts here, for example, our waveform is not going to be absolutely perfect. So it's, it might be like this, but it might not. Okay, 0 and 5 volts. So we have to actually set boundaries in here where something is determined to be a logic 1 and a logic 0. So in this particular case, like it might be, say, 4 volts, just as an example. And anything above 4 volts, so anything in here, is determined to be a logic 1. And likewise, anything in here is determined to be a logic 1. And anything under here like this is determined to be a logic 0. So these levels can be called 1 and 0, true and false, high and low, or 5 volts and 0 volts, whatever you want to call it. But if the signal is inside this region here, then it's an undefined state. Digital doesn't know what to do with it. Systems don't know what to do with it. So if you've got a slow change in signal like this that ramps up from 0 to 1 volt like this, then this time period, all this period in here is unknown. So your digital system is not going to know how to interpret that. So that is why you'll always see digital signals being just 1 or 0 with as fast an edge as humanly possible. So in a typical digital logic system, we might have a chip here, for example, that is connected to ground and is connected to 5 volts or 3.3 volts, for example, are very typical modern digital logic levels, or even lower, 1.8, 1.2 volts. It doesn't matter. It's going to represent a binary value, 1 and 0, true and false, high and low. And you'll have various inputs to the chip, and you'll have various outputs to the chip. And these are all going to be either 1 or 0, or 1 or 0, i.e. in case of a 5 volt rail chip, you'd have 5 volts here and you'd have 0 volts here, and it's expecting 5 volts on the input and 0 volts on the input here with those margins that we talked about before. So what we need to do is actually look at basic digital gates. These chips are all going to contain digital logic, or what's called digital logic gates. And there's only a handful of different types of gates which can be used to make up any chip, be it your latest Intel microprocessor that's got 100 million gates in between. So let's take a look at your basic logic gates. Now, there are 3 types of basic gates that you're going to need to know for starters: the AND gate, the OR gate, and the NOT gate, more commonly referred to as an inverter or an inverter gate. So let's take a look at the traditional symbols for these. There are 2 different types of symbols, which makes it a bit confusing. You should know both of them now. They're both defined by IEEE and IEC and that sort of stuff. But I'm just going to call these the traditional style ones. So the traditional style AND gate is a line like that with a curved line like that. You can think of it as a D. Just remember the D, and make like that. So you've got one output and you've got at least two inputs. As we'll see, an AND gate needs at least two inputs. You can have more, but that's a special case. Now the OR gate is actually shaped like this, curved there, and then like, oh, that's not very good, is it? So we'll just draw that one a bit nicer. Once again, two inputs, one output. Now the NOT gate is different in that it only has one input and one output, and it's got this circle on the end here, and this circle is known as a NOT symbol. So the inverted symbol, if you just want to draw it on its own, is the triangle plus the little knot there. Now this knot can actually be used on its own. If they need to know the IC symbols, I'll call them, and they're all boring square boxes like this, and we can put our two inputs and our one output, and it's got an AND symbol in the middle like that. It's actually reasonably descriptive, so from that point of view, I don't mind it at all, and I occasionally use those myself. And the OR one, once again, our square, but it's got greater than or equal to 1, and you'll see why in a minute. So I never really liked that, but in our NOT is once again a square, but it's got 1, and then our one input, one output, but instead of putting the circle, they define it as a little 45-degree diagonal line like that. So that just implies the NOT function, and you might have seen that in some data sheet checks as well. Now it's actually called digital logic for a reason, because these gates and OR and the inverter perform logical functions which we can use to perform computations. That's how computers and everything else are. The modern digital, almost practically everything in modern society works using digital logic. Now we can use what's called a truth table here, and you have to know these. You should remember it off by heart and learn how each particular function works. Now we've got two inputs here. I've labeled them A and B, and the output C here. So you just draw a table like this with our inputs and our on one side and our output on the other side, and you basically fill it out with all of the possible combinations. So the two inputs could be 0 and 0, low and low. It could be 0 and 1. It could be 1 and 0, and it could be 1, 1. We've got two inputs, four possible combinations, and you might notice, if you know, well, you probably don't know binary if you're still watching this, this is a binary count from 0, 1, 2, 3, and I have to do a separate video on binary or number systems. And the output is a function of these two inputs here. So in this case, an AND gate, the output is true or 1 only if both A and get it, A and B are 1. So according to that rule, are A and B 1? No. So it's not true. It's a 0. Is both A and B 1 in this case? No, it's not. Is A and B 1 in this case? No, it's not. Are both A and B 1 in this case? Yes, bingo. And that is our truth table for the AND gate. The output here, C, is only true if both A and B inputs are true. That's it. And just like the name of the gate AND was descriptive of its functionality here, OR is also descriptive of its functionality. So we go in and we write the exact same table that we had before. So the combination of our inputs is exactly the same as the AND gate. So we write down the four possible combinations. They don't have to be in this order, strictly speaking, but by convention, they start at 0, 0 and count their way up, depending on how many inputs you have. So let's have a look at this. Now, the functionality of an OR gate is the output is true, i.e. the output is 1, C is 1, if A or, get it, A or B is 1. So is A or B 1 in this case? Nope, they're both 0. So our output is 0. Is either A or B 1? Yes, B is a 1. So our output's going to be 1. Is A or B 1? Yes, it is. And in the final case here, they're both 1, but that's okay because it's an OR function. Is this 1, 1, or this 1 a 1? Yes. So the output is 1. That's our OR gate. And our inverter is incredibly easy too. We only have one input A and we have one output B. We've only got two combinations of inputs, high or low, true or false, 1 or 0. And our output, the name once again describes the function invert. So it inverts basically it inverts the polarity is not the correct term, but it inverts the function of the input. So if it's a 0 on the input, you get a 1 on the output. If it's a 1 on the input, you get a 0 on the output. That's simple. That's our inverter. Now, as far as two input gates go, AND and OR aren't the only ones. There's another special snowflake, which I'll tell you about in a second. But the reason I mentioned these three first is because with AND, ANDs, OR, and inverter gates, you can create any other gate or combination or digital system whatsoever. These three are the ones that you need to do all that. Actually, strictly speaking, that's not true. You only need the NOT and the or the NOT and the AND. Then you can create any other logic gate or logic system possible. Okay, so we're going to look at one kind of a special snowflake one here called the XOR or exclusive OR. That's what the X stands for, exclusive, because, well, it's a very exclusive gate. But it is also, a common gate used, so it should get grouped together with the other types of two input gates. So AND, OR, and XOR are the three main types of two input gates. So let's take a look at the functionality. Once again, A, B, C. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. Simple as do, re, mi. Sorry, I shouldn't subject you to singing. We've got our inputs just like before. Oh, sorry, I forgot that it's not just a blank box like that. It's actually equals to 1 like that. That's our IEC exclusive OR symbol. So the exclusive OR function is almost identical to the OR function over here, but it's exclusive, which means that it has a special functionality. Now, just like the OR gate, if A or B is 1, then the output is 1. But with the exclusive case, and I guess you can how a different description for this, but the exclusive case of that only when A or B is 1 is the output 1. So in this case, is A or B 1? No. So we get a 0. Is A or B 1? Yes, we get a 1. Is A or B 1? Yes, we get a 1. Is A or B 1? In this case, for the OR gate, it would have been a high, but in this case, it's going to give us a 0. So this exclusive OR is actually a very powerful function that allows us to do controlled inversion, which I might explain later. But yeah, there are three types of two input gates, AND, OR, XOR with the NOT. Now what we can do now is actually combine the NOT or inversion function with our other three two input gates to give us what are called inverted two input gates. And these are called the NAND gate, the NOR gate, and the XNOR gate, and N for NOT. So it's exactly the same, but we've added the symbol is now adding that NOT, that circle on the output like that I showed you before. So that's actually equivalent to getting a physical AND gate like this and sticking an inverter on the output like that. In fact, you can do that. You can get a physical NAND gate chip, you can get a physical inverter chip, and you can put them like that, and it's exactly the same as buying a NAND gate chip like that, because that's all it contains inside the chip is it's got an extra inverter NOT circuit on the output. Now you might think, hey, do we have to learn more truth tables for these gates up here, NAND, NOR, and XNOR? Well, yes, you do. But if you've learned the truth tables, or you can derive the truth tables for AND, OR, and XOR here, then you can do the same for the NAND, because we've just added, remember, this inverter on the output. So we can just take our output here, which is C, and what do? All our inputs stay the same, they haven't changed. But in this case, we'd have a 1, 1, 1, and a 0. So that is for our NAND function. So that's all you have to do. Likewise here, 1, 0, 0, 0, and 1, 0, 0, 1 for the XNOR and the NOR gate. Simple. You just invert the output. So let's actually look at a timing diagram, because you're probably familiar with the oscilloscope where it displays voltage versus time.